We're great at telling our employees what not to click on, but we're terrible at selling them on why they should care. It's time to stop training and start marketing our security culture. This is Security Awareness Reimagined. Up next, we have Mike Taylor. He is a learning consultant over at Nationwide, who is on your side, I've heard. Anyway, just kidding. They are, though. Welcome, everybody. This is Security Awareness Reimagined, Marketing Tactics for Real Impact. So welcome, Mike. It's great to have you here. The floor is yours, sir. I'm going to catch up with you at the end and ask you a few questions of my own, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. And hello to everybody else. So let's go ahead and jump in here. I'd like to kind of start with a couple of questions. The first one is, what if I told you the secret to better security awareness training is hiding in your marketing department's playbook? So, the second question that is a follow-up to that, you can kind of see it on the screen here, and I bet you have at least one answer that probably jumps immediately to your mind when you see this question. What would you like to steal, adopt, or borrow from marketing or from your marketing department, if you have one, if you're lucky enough to have one? So when I ask this question, I usually hear things like, oh, I'd like their budget, I like their visual design skills. Maybe it's their ability to make people actually pay attention, which is a huge thing. And today I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into that and kind of talk about, why would we look at marketing maybe versus why not accounting or finance or procurement or some other field? And what I would say is the answer to that is the thing is that we share some really core fundamental goals. So security awareness and training and marketing, we're really trying to do the same thing if you kind of stop and think about it. And what that is we're both trying to get people's attention. And then once we get that attention, to influence their behavior, help them to think and act in new ways. But even though we have the same goals, those two fields often take very, very different approaches. So what I like to do is I like to show you what I mean about these different approaches with a simple example. So imagine that you and a marketer both have the same project and you need to sell hamburgers. So the exact same hamburgers. And if you're a trainer or security awareness team, your effort at selling those hamburgers probably may look something like this. Most of us in training related functions would approach this by focusing on features, facts, logical benefits, and all of that is true and useful information. But if we walk down the hall to the marketing department and we compare what they're going to come up with for the very same project, it's going to look something like this. And you'll notice, what they're doing different is they're leading with emotion and appetite and appeal and desire. And they're using things like impactful visuals, simplicity, colors, and all of these things really align with how our brains process information and the things that we're persuaded by. So same hamburger, completely different approach. And, I would venture to say that it's probably pretty clear which one of these approaches is more likely to end with you buying a hamburger, don't you think? So that's what I want to kind of get into this and break this down a little bit further. So today I've got 3 things from the marketing world that can completely change the way your people see security. The cool thing is, it doesn't require any extra budget, no complicated or expensive tools. It's really just a new perspective that you can put to work right away. So as soon as we're done here, you can go and apply this right away, which is awesome. So the first thing that all good marketers understand quite well is that facts don't change behavior. Think about it. If they did, nobody would ever smoke, everybody would exercise, we'd be in great shape. and we'd all have perfect passwords, right? But we know that's not true. And the reason for this disconnect is our brains don't work the way most of us think they do. A really great book here that I highly recommend by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. So he and others have shown that we have two distinct types of thinking systems. They're called System 1 and System 2. If we look at this a little bit more closely, the important thing to understand is System 1 is fast, emotional. We can't turn it off even if we wanted to. It's always on. And it largely operates unconsciously and automatically. So things that we're wired for evolutionarily. So tens, hundreds of thousands of years, evolution has hardwired that into our brains. If we compare that to System 2, this is more analytical, it's slower, it's logical, it's weaker, it tires you. Think about doing a math problem, that's tiring, it tires you out easily, multitasking. It requires conscious effort and control. So those are the two systems that we're dealing with. And here's the kicker. So our conscious mind, that logical, analytical side, can process about 40 bits of data per second. But System 1, that emotional subconscious side, 11 million bits of data per second, and no, that is not a typo. So it's like comparing your garden hose with Niagara Falls when it comes to the volume of data and information that's being processed by these two different systems. So what that means is that over 95% of the stuff happening in our brain is happening subconsciously. Lots of fascinating studies about how that works. But what typically happens is we make decisions based on our subconscious, and then our logic comes in and backfills it with logic afterwards. So all of that is really to say that we don't think as much as we think we think. And one of the implications of this whole story is kind of captured really well by this illustration here. Nothing changes until someone feels something. So not when they just think about it, not when they simply understand something. It's when they feel it. It's that emotional connection. And that's the switch that flips behavior. So when we roll out security awareness using only facts and policies and logic, what we're doing is we're really trying to change behavior, but we're skipping over the one part of the brain that actually drives behavior change, which is emotion. I mentioned there's a lot of research behind this. Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman's book, is a really great resource to start to learn more about this. But marketers really understand that when we're talking with people, they're not really conscious actors, but they're really driven by their unconscious mind. So marketers are great at speaking to that. And the key takeaway here, the first thing is to understand when we're trying to influence people's behavior that emotions drive decisions and behavior, whereas that System 2, that logical side's just writing the press release and backfilling the logic for what happened based on emotion. So that's the first thing that we should steal from marketers. And that leads us into the next thing that marketers are really great at that we should steal. And that's understanding that you can't create lasting change with a single message. You have to build recognition and trust and all of these things over time. If you think about it, an advertiser would never run one ad and then sit back and see what happens. But a lot of times in our world, that's what happens. We give them the annual compliance training course. We sit back and hope that that works. So let's unpack that a little bit more. Too many attempts in the training and learning world try to influence behavior with what I call a say and pray approach. So we tell them one time, and then we just pray that it works. Whereas if we think about the marketer's world, they understand that one message or one touch point is never going to be enough, and that real change comes from campaigns. So that's consistent, branded, repeated touches, in our case, which is going to keep security messages and behavior top of mind of our audience or our learners. Now, there's tons and tons of benefits. I could talk about campaigns probably all day, but I want to kind of highlight, 3 simple benefits that we can see as a result of applying this campaign mindset. The first one is better learning. It helps us beat the forgetting curve. So a really high percentage of the messages and the training that we see disappears within 1 hour, certainly within 1 day. It's up to almost 90%. There's a lot of learning research behind this. So instead of dumping information on people and hoping it sticks, campaigns can spread that learning out in a way that matches how human memory actually works. So it's not just common sense. There's a mountain of research that shows how this approach is something that gets better results. The second thing that we can gain from using this campaign mindset is there are some easy to set up and automate tools. I'm a huge fan of email marketing tools. So that's maybe a bonus 4th thing to steal is email marketing tools. But they're free, dead simple things that you can set up your content that you probably already have. You could start this, within as little of an hour to set up one of these automated campaigns. So for example, I think this is one of the low-hanging fruits that you could absolutely do right away. Take your annual compliance course, pull out the key takeaways. Maybe there's 12. That would be nice and simple. You could just send one out every month over the course of the year to support and reinforce what you're telling them in the annual course. Or maybe you just make it 6 takeaways and you send them twice each over the course of the year. So that steady rhythm is going to reinforce and enhance what you're already doing. So it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of thing. Spend an hour or 2 up front. Then you get this consistent spaced learning that's rolling out and dripping out to people over the course of the year. As I said, huge fan of what email marketing tools can do for this. Super quick and easy to get something like that set up and running no matter where you are, what type of organization you're in. And then the last thing, you don't have to blow up what you're already doing. As I mentioned in that previous example, take things and content that you've already got, repurpose it, pull them apart, drip them out over time. So you can see I'm not reinventing the wheel. What we're doing is just working a little bit smarter instead of harder. And of course, who doesn't like that approach, right? So let me show you a couple things campaign-wise that we've done and that have worked well for us in our internal campaigns here at Nationwide. So we found 2 things that really move the needle for us when we're thinking in this way. First one is having a clear, consistent visual style or visual branding. And what that does for us is it lets people instantly recognize who we are, where it's coming from. And then second thing that we do is we have a human side. So we have a personality. So we're pretty lucky. We've got an internal character, and we've used that throughout multiple different campaigns. So we've got an identity. So let's talk a little bit about, what exactly specifically does all of that mean? So we have found, if you're in a big organization like me, when it comes to our security message, this design is not just decoration and making things look nice. It's a trust signal. So people see an email or a poster or a slide, and they can instantly identify, hey, this is from the security team. and this is probably going to be worth my time and worth paying attention to. Because the challenge is, in a company like ours that's pretty big, we've got IT that does training and HR that does training and ethics that does training. We've got all of these groups, but our employees, they don't know the difference. So that's where this consistent visual branding steps in. And marketers have known this forever, that when your look is clear and recognizable, people don't have to guess. They see it, they know it's us, and they know there's value inside. And that's how you build that recognition and trust. And I also want to sort of just call out that you still have to deliver the value. It can't just be dressed up and look nice without delivering the value. So that's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig, and it just doesn't quite work. The other thing, we are an insurance company. And as you probably are very familiar of, insurance companies love brand characters. Jake from State Farm and Flo and all of the people. So what we have done for our internal campaigns is we've sort of decided to kind of jump on that bandwagon. And about 6 years ago is when we started our first foray into this. Back when Game of Thrones was at peak of its hype and popularity. And we did a series of videos, again, Game of Thrones themed. And Josh from one of our other training teams, we suited him up as the guard. And we've been using him ever since as a sort of repeating character in multiple different campaigns over the past 6 years. And the thing that we have found from that is it really stops people in their tracks. It captures their attention. You know, there's a real human here, a real emotional connection. You know, and that combination of attention and emotion is why it sticks, and it's been such a success for us. And people still talk about that campaign from 6 years ago. Josh is great. The writing was great. So lots of good things going into that. And one of the best sort of testaments to how successful that's been is I get emails, people asking me for more training. So this is an actual quote from one of those emails. That guy's amazing. Is he in any other training? I don't even care what the topic is. So that's a pretty big endorsement for both our approach to this and also to Josh's skill as an actor and a character. So kind of to put a bow on this idea of this, you know, campaign mindset, security, awareness, and training, it's sort of like fitness. You can't just do one big workout and be fit or healthy. But if you do consistent effort over time, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. So that's 2 out of the 3. That brings us to the third thing worth stealing from our marketing friends. And that is actually checking to see if any of this stuff is working. Marketers are really good at not just guessing when a campaign or an ad is going to work. They track the numbers. They look at data. And the data shows them, you know, what's hitting the mark, what's falling flat, and that lets them adjust and improve what they're doing and iterate towards better as they move forward. So in our world here at Nationwide, this is a real example that we did about, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now, is we were looking at our phishing test results, and we noticed that new hires were getting tripped up and failing those a lot more often than associates who had been around for a while. So instead of just putting something out and not knowing if it's working or not, what we did was we did an A/B test. It's kind of experiments that marketing teams use all the time. So an A/B test is just you put out 2 versions, you measure which one is better, then you go with the better one. Pretty simple concept that we can do in a lot of ways in the security awareness and training arena. So what we did was we split new hires into 2 groups. Group A gets the standard compliance course, and that was it. Group B, they also got the standard compliance course, But in addition to that, they got 5 super short weekly emails with phishing education in those messages. So what to look for, how to report it, why it matters. We had a message from our CISO in there. And then we ran that and we compared their phishing test results between the 2 groups. And then what we found was that those new associates who got the onboarding campaign with that extra phishing email were much more likely to report phishing attempts. So now we've got data that says, hey, what we're doing works, and now we've rolled that out to everyone, and we've got a really solid foundation for understanding that that works. Behind that campaign, I've mentioned email marketing platforms now a couple times, and I love these tools because it gives us analytics to show us what's working and what's not. So when I'm sending this automated email campaign, I get data. I can see what are they clicking, are they opening, how much time are they spending, and it lets us have a view into what's happening instead of just throwing content out into the void and crossing your fingers. Now we've got data that's actionable that will help us improve what we're doing over time. So this is just kind of a quick glance at one of the reports and the kind of data that you can get. I can see who opened the message. This particular campaign, I can see half of them actually clicked. I get a timeline that shows when they engage. So that maybe helps me know when is the best time to send these emails. And there's a lot more data here. This particular one, I can also see that more than half of the people spent a significant amount of time instead of just glanced at it as they're going through their inbox. So lots of really great stuff that we can get from these email analytics. And then that's the gist of this data section. There's a lot more. Again, each of these 3, we could probably talk for days on end about each one. But marketers test, they learn, they adjust, and they kind of repeat that cycle. And it's not a complicated thing. It's just not what most people do. So if you sat down and thought about what are some of the things I could experiment with, my guess is you could probably come up with a handful of things that you could start testing right away. And it's going to really improve your results of your security awareness and training program. So quick recap, the 3 things we talked about that we might want to steal from marketing is talk to that intuitive, subconscious, emotional brain. We're not designing for the perfectly rational decision maker. That person doesn't really exist. Think about designing for real humans, which means emotional, distracted, and largely running on autopilot most of the time. Second, think in branded campaigns. So one training session might raise awareness, maybe, but it probably won't shift behavior and culture. And what does do that are those consistent, recognizable touch points over time that help keep your program top of mind. And then the third thing, be data informed. Use data as your guide. So completion rates don't really mean much. It's not that type of data. Those don't tell you much. But look for tiny experiments that you can do that will actually impact behavior change, which is our ultimate goal. And like I said earlier, the best part of all of this is you don't need marketing's budget to pull all of this stuff off. It's really just a mindset. So adopt their mindset, and that you can do for free today, pretty easily. And ultimately, our goal at Nationwide, and I think most people's goal should also be, it's not just about better security awareness. We're trying to transform security from a compliance burden to become a competitive advantage. When we see people doing this as a tool to empower people instead of putting handcuffs on them and being the no police and that sort of stuff, it really changed the game. And suddenly people aren't just rule followers. Now they can kind of step into that hero role of protecting the company. and that's when we stop from nagging and start building a security culture that lasts and is really effective. So one last question to pose to you as we sort of start to wrap up here, what one thing would you steal first? My advice would be pick one small thing. Don't try to revolutionize your entire program all at once. So maybe that looks like starting with a small A/B test on your email subject lines. Maybe you create a simple branded template for your communications. Or maybe you even just change, one slide in your next training that speaks to that emotional type thinking instead of logic. And again, the beautiful thing about stealing from the marketing field is you don't need permission, you don't need budget approval, and you really don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You just need to start. And if you do, I would love to hear about that. I would love to hear how it goes. If you'd like a copy of my slides, extra resources, I've got a video of Josh in there if you're curious to see what that campaign looks like. So thanks for hanging in there with me today. Happy to take questions. My contact information is in there as well. And hopefully there's one valuable thing that you can steal from marketing in all of that.
Thanks so much, Mike. Great job. Really, really like the presentation. I've got a few questions if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So my first one is, a lot of our folks are, they're IT, they're security guys, right? No big surprise there. But the mindset's a little different, right? So some of us, got into IT and computers and stuff because we didn't have to deal with people.
Yep.
But now we have to. But how do you get out of that, I guess, our mindset of, ones and zeros or whatever? But it's a different animal, right? If you go to and start borrowing from marketing, because that's not what we're used to in tech. So how do you kind of shift your mind or shift gears and get into that mindset?
Yeah, I think the key is sort of setting that light bulb off that counter to what most people intuitively think, humans are not logical. So this is even in the economics field, like there's this concept that, give people logical situations, they'll do logical things. And that's been proven repeatedly over decades not to be true.
Right.
And when you start to see people as emotional creatures and not logical creatures, it seems like a simple shift, but it's really, really monumental in the results and, grabbing attention, taking that next step into behavior change. It's just understanding like we're emotional creatures who think, not thinking creatures who have emotions.
Good way to look at it. I like that. And as you mentioned that, we just talked about emotions and logic. What do you think about, or what specific emotions could the IT or security professional aim to evoke as they're doing these things to get people to actually pay attention? So what emotions do you see kind of most, I guess, work the best?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I actually wrote a book that came out in May, and one of the things we talk about in the first chapter is this idea that we're talking about of emotional creatures. But there are 6 attention triggers that you can leverage that sort of align with the way our brains are wired. So a couple of them include things like if you're writing content or you're creating a presentation, is to make it personally relevant. So our brains are wired to pay attention to things that are relevant to us. So a lot of presentations and content says, we this, we that, we that. Our brains won't pay attention to that. If you flip that and you say, you this, you that, that's speaking directly to us. So it's personally relevant. That's a big thing. Using visuals, making things memorable. There's a whole set of sort of marketing hacks that you can use that are simple and free, like everything else we've talked about, that will tilt the odds in your favor and are much more likely to have people pay attention to what messaging you're trying to get across.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Where can we find that book?
you can go to trainlikeamarketer.com. We've got, in addition to being able to find information about the book, we've also got some downloads and resources about the attention triggers. We have a model, the Sure model, that sort of helps you write content that will land with people, and other tools like that to help you adopt this marketing mindset.
I like it. I like it. Let me ask you this. We haven't brought this up at all, and I feel like I'm going to ruin it if I even say the 2 letters, but what do you think about using AI to create some of this content for you?
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of using AI, but the key is there still needs to be a human driving the ship.
Yeah.
And so AI can give you a lot of content, but the piece that AI probably won't give is that human emotional, how can I make this personally relevant? And it requires a human who understands the audience. So that's another thing that marketers do really well we didn't talk about, is really understanding your audience. What's their environment? What are their challenges? What are their goals? And that's the piece that allows you to use that trick to make things personally relevant. So it's the combination of understanding your audience as well as possible and speaking directly to those specific people. In marketing, they call that personas, just as applicable in security awareness and training as it is in marketing.
Right. Well, it goes back to the data that you were talking about too. Looking at and analyzing and knowing what that data is can actually help you with that as well. So I like it.
Absolutely.
One last question. How can folks kind of create their own brand character? I mean, it kind of depends on where you're at, right? But like, what are some of the things that you looked at when you identified this guy at your organization? You're like, what kind of made it seem like that's our dude? And that's kind of where
so we were lucky, and it was somewhat of a fluke for us because the reaction was so large and positive. It was obvious, like, hey, we've got to continue this. And so we've used him throughout, and he's willing. And so we lucked out. But the things outside of the character that we do is sort of visual branding. So colors, design. We have an internal security awareness training brand style guide. And so that's visual things, colors, but it's also voice and style and language that we use. So we're really big proponents of, casual conversational language. And then the other big thing that I'm really grateful that we do is we try to put a positive spin on all of this. So instead of, don't click this and don't do that, no, it's, hey, this is what you can do, and you can be the hero, and you can be an asset, and you can protect. And, those messages come across very differently, and they feel very differently when you're on the receiving end. So we always try to keep it in that positive light. And all of those things sort of combine into your brand. And if you don't think you have a brand, I assure you, you do have it. And if you don't think you do, it may not be as good as you want it to be.
Interesting. I like it. Well, reach out to Mike if you have any other additional questions. Check out that QR code. He's got some the resources in there, the slides and whatnot. There is the video. I'm going to tack the video onto the end of this, so it'll play after I'm done talking, so you guys can kind of check out what he's talking about with what they've done there. It's cool. That's all I'm going to say. I've seen it, but it's fun. If you guys can kind of do this kind of stuff, I can see where you could get some good engagement out of your fellow colleagues and employees at a place by doing this kind of fun stuff. So anyway, that being said, enjoy the video.
Heading home for the evening? Alas, I cannot stop you. But know this, you are at great risk once you travel beyond the network. thieves and walkers lie in wait, waiting to take advantage of your weak home network and your pitiable laptop. Why, even your Zune is at risk. What? You've never heard of a Zune? It's the little rectangle with which you can listen to the songs of the wonderful songstress Cindy Lauper and play the game of the mind sweeping. You've never heard of this? You have what? An android? What language doth you speak, traveler? Who's ever heard of such a thing? But alas, even your non-Zune devices are at risk beyond the network. Because everything is at risk. Trust all of your learning and practice thy secure behaviors. For unlike the songstress Lauper, if you fall, I will not catch you, and I will not be waiting time after time. I mean, send a raven if you can, and if I'm in the area, I'll stop in, but I can't promise anything. Count only on yourself and being twice as secure when you're beyond the network as you were here today within it. Farewell, traveler. I bid you kind winds. No, Zune. Preposterous.